The next item of business is a statement by John Swinney on the situation in Gaza. The First Minister will take questions at the end of his statement. Therefore, there should be no interventions or interruptions. And I call on the First Minister around 15 minutes, please.
Presiding Officer, the situation in Gaza is a man-made humanitarian catastrophe. Over 63,000 people in Gaza have been killed and many more maimed. Most of the Strip lies in ruins. And famine now grips the population. In a compelling address to the United Nations Security Council on the 27th of August, Joyce Msuya, the UN's Deputy Humanitarian Chief, advised that famine had been confirmed in north-central Gaza, where Gaza City is located, and that is expected to spread to the south by the end of this month. The scale of suffering is unimaginable. Nobody can ignore it. We must confront this crisis with urgency, compassion and an unwavering commitment to accountability. I know that colleagues across this Parliament share my horror at what is unfolding in Gaza. Presiding Officer, this Government has consistently and unequivocally condemned the terrorist attacks carried out by Hamas on the 7th of October 2023, which claimed the lives of over 1,200 Israelis and saw 251 hostages taken. We have joined the international community in demanding the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. All human life is equal, Israeli and Palestinian alike. We have repeatedly called for an immediate and sustained ceasefire by all parties, a call that was endorsed by this Parliament on the 21st of November 2023, and for humanitarian aid to flow unrestricted into the territory. And we have urged the United Kingdom Government to recognise the state of Palestine within the 1967 borders, joining over 140 UN member states and growing, and aligning with the international consensus on a two-state solution. While I welcome the intent behind the decision of the UK Government to recognise a Palestinian state at the UN General Assembly this month, recognition must not be conditional and should be irreversible. It is the right of Palestinians, not the gift of international powers, and must be backed by sanctions against the Israeli Government. A two-state solution is the only way that Palestinian and Israeli peoples can have a future living side by side in peace and security. The Palestinian people and the Israeli people deserve no less. The Government of Israel has, however, overtly rejected this position, announcing another massive illegal settlement in the West Bank, with Israel's Finance Minister explicitly claiming that the development would bury the idea of a Palestinian state. On Monday, I spoke to Dr. Hussam Zomlot, the head of the Palestinian Mission in London. He described how settler violence and land grabs in the West Bank are accelerating, how it looked different to even 2 years ago, with Palestinian towns and cities behind barbed wire and walls and roadblocks choking mobility across the territory. He told me that the economy was being choked, with unemployment around 50%. He was convinced that the aim of the activity was, as the Israeli Finance Minister set out, to end the prospect of a Palestinian state. The Israeli Security Cabinet's decision to seize Gaza City last month has been condemned by the United Kingdom, the majority of the UN Security Council and senior UN figures. But again, the Israeli Government has paid no heed. We need to act. The UK Government needs to act. I am therefore calling for the immediate recognition of the Palestinian state, strengthened sanctions against those complicit in illegal settlements, and the imposition of sanctions on the members of the Israeli Security Cabinet where they are complicit in the horrors facing civilians in Gaza City. I welcomed the UK Government's announcement in May that it had suspended trade negotiations with Israel, but it is clear that this action has made no difference. It is therefore time for the United Kingdom to withdraw from the UK-Israel Free Trade Agreement in view of Israel's behaviour. I am also calling on the UK Government to follow the example of Ireland and prohibit the import of goods produced in Israeli settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories. Presiding Officer, this Government has contributed to humanitarian responses to the Gaza crisis, contributing to date £1.3 million for Gaza and the wider Middle East. In November 2023, we provided £750,000 to support access to food, water, shelter and medical supplies for over 670,000 displaced people. More recently, we provided £550,000 for the DEC Middle East Appeal, SCIAF and Mercy Corps. We welcome that the UK Government has committed to supporting the evacuation of Gazan students who have been awarded places at Scottish universities. I've been calling for some time for the UK to end arms sales to Israel. The UK Government's decision to suspend some arms licences was welcome, but I believe should go further. All licensed arms exports should stop. Presiding Officer, I said recently that I shared the concerns of other countries and international leaders that a genocide appears to be unfolding in Gaza. I did not make that claim lightly. The legal determination of genocide is the responsibility of international courts. The International Court of Justice has found a prima facie case that Israel was committing genocide. Under Article 2 of the 1948 Genocide Convention, 2 conditions must be met for genocide to be established. 1, that specific acts such as killing, causing serious bodily or mental harm, or inflicting life conditions calculated to destroy a group have occurred. And 2, that these acts were carried out with the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnic, racial or religious group. Credible, widely documented evidence suggests that both of these conditions may be present in Israel's conduct in Gaza. Over 63,000 Palestinians, the majority of them civilians, including over 15,000 children, have been killed since October 2023. Vital infrastructure, including hospitals, homes, schools and water systems, have been systematically destroyed. Access to food, water and medical aid has been obstructed. The entire population has faced repeated forced displacement, often under life-threatening conditions. Statements by senior Israeli officials include dehumanising language and express intent to eliminate Gaza. Defence Minister Gallant described Palestinians as, and I quote, human animals. Prime Minister Netanyahu invoked the biblical command, remember Amalek, historically associated with collective annihilation. The Finance Minister Smotrich said that Gaza would be entirely destroyed and its civilians relocated to a humanitarian zone in the south before they would leave their homeland. These statements have been cited in South Africa's legal submissions to the International Court of Justice. International legal scholars have argued that they help establish the specific intent required for a finding of genocide under the Convention. Governments must act now. Our neighbours in Ireland were the first government in the European Union to say what the Israeli government was doing was genocide, when the Taoiseach told the Dáil on the 28th of May that the Israeli government was committing genocide in Gaza. The UN Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese concluded in March 2024 that there are reasonable grounds to believe that the threshold indicating the commission of genocide against Palestinians in Gaza has been met. In April 2025, UN humanitarian chief Tom Fletcher stated, "This is not a war for security, it is a war to erase a people, and our failure to stop it will haunt our generation and history." The United Kingdom Government should support the international rule of law and join South Africa's case at the ICJ and commit to implementing the ICC arrest warrants. The UK must end military cooperation with the Israeli government while the war continues and the question of genocide remains current. Presiding Officer, I want to address directly accusations that this opinion that I have set out could be seen as anti-Semitic. Let me be clear. I utterly reject anti-Semitism and all forms of racism and hatred. I stand with Scotland's Jewish, Muslim and Palestinian communities and condemn all forms of anti-Semitism, Islamophobia and racism. I recognise the trauma experienced by these communities and pledge, as First Minister, to ensure their safety and their dignity. On Monday, I met members of Scotland's Jewish community. I did so because I wanted to reassure them of the respect that I have for the contribution the community makes to all aspects of Scottish life. They are an integral part of Scotland's story. They are a valued and cherished community in Scotland. I recognise, however, that events in the Middle East and reactions to these events here in Scotland do cause anxiety for members of our Jewish community, irrespective of their individual views on the conflict. I also know that members of our community have been affected by Hamas's terrorism in the worst possible way, and again pay tribute to the memory of Bernard Cowan. My condemnation of this Israeli government's actions is grounded in international law, human rights and belief in the equal value of every human life. Many Jewish organisations and individuals have condemned the assault on Gaza. Their courage reminds us that to speak out against mass violence is not anti-Semitic. It is deeply human. In fact, to speak out is our moral and legal responsibility. Presiding Officer, the challenge to this Parliament, this Government, the United Kingdom Government and governments across the world is that if we agree we are witnessing an unfolding genocide, then what action should we take? I've spoken about the actions I'm calling on the UK Government to take, but let me now turn to what this Government will do. We are instructing relevant delivery bodies, where possible, not to provide support facilitating trade between Scotland and Israel. The UK has treaty obligations and duties in international law to respond appropriately when a situation involving a serious risk of genocide arises. The Ministerial Code under which I operate, Section 1.7, lays a clear responsibility on all ministers to comply with, and I quote, international law and treaty obligations. The International Court of Justice has made it plain that risk exists. Indeed, it said that there is a prima facie case of genocide in Gaza. The Scottish Government cannot ignore this. Previously, we have provided business grants and investment support to companies involved in the design, production, supply and support of military equipment, technologies and services. We do so because we recognise that defending our country, defending our continent, is a duty of government. Anyone watching the war in Ukraine would, I hope, recognise the reality of the importance of defence. Indeed, the invasion shows we live in a world in which our national security faces much greater and more immediate threats. In recognition of that changed international landscape, the Scottish Government will lift the restriction that we have applied on the use of support for the production of munitions. But in the face of genocide, there can be no business as usual. We will pause new awards of public money to arms companies whose products or services are provided to countries where there is plausible evidence of genocide being committed by that country. That will include Israel. The pause will apply where possible to new grants provided or investment made by the Scottish Government, our enterprise agencies and the Scottish National Investment Bank. Any defence company seeking support from the Scottish Government will have to demonstrate that its products are not involved militarily with Israel. The UK Government should review what other steps it must now take in view of the United Kingdom's duty in international law to respond when there is a serious risk of genocide. And the international court must come ultimately to a determination of the case against the Israeli government of genocide. Until we have that clarity, however, new public monies should not go to arms companies involved with the Israeli military. I know there will be people in Scotland, not least apprentices funded by the Scottish Government working on the Clyde, at Rosyth and elsewhere, asking, what does this mean for me? So let me be clear. We've made a commitment, a legally binding commitment to those young people, and it will be honoured. Anyone in an apprenticeship or with a formal offer will continue to be funded in their current place for the full duration of the apprenticeship. Presiding Officer, this is a humanitarian crisis, and Scotland will directly address that humanitarian need. We have a long history of helping those in desperate need, and we will not be found wanting now. I can announce today that we will provide £400,000 to Kids Operating Room to establish the Gaza Hopes Field Readiness Hub in Scotland. This funding will help unlock $50 million of additional funding to deliver a rapidly deployable hospital in Gaza. Designed in Scotland to be built in just a week, it can operate in the most challenging environments and last for decades. It will provide essential surgical, maternity and paediatric services to thousands of patients every year. The hub or pilot hospital will be coordinated from the city of Dundee and will support further deployments, similar deployments in future crises. We will also donate £600,000 to the UN OCHA-led humanitarian fund for the occupied Palestinian territories, which will provide life-saving health services, food and nutrition assistance, emergency shelter, water and sanitation, protection services, education support and cash for families, ensuring aid reaches those most at risk. We have also committed to providing medical support for up to 20 injured children from Gaza and expect the first arrivals along with their families in mid-September. While there are significant challenges in relocating human rights defenders, such as journalists from Gaza at this moment in time, we are determined to do what we can and will explore this and other ways of supporting their vital work at pace. We will support those struggling for justice, however distant a prospect that currently seems. We are exploring practical measures to bring expertise within Scotland's legal establishment, our universities and our civil society to contribute to gathering and preserving evidence that may be used in international criminal cases. Presiding Officer, we are witnessing a humanitarian disaster of historic proportions, and yet the bombs continue to fall. The world cannot wait for a final court ruling before acting. The signs are clear, the alarm has been raised, the bombs and rockets must stop and humanitarian aid must flow. The international community, including the United Kingdom Government, must recognise a Palestinian state as the first step towards peace and a two-stage solution, a solution where the peoples of both Israel and Palestine can live side by side in peace and security. Acknowledging that we are witnessing the signs of genocide brings with it a responsibility to act. The people of Scotland expect no less of us. For the duration of this afternoon's business, I have authorised that the Palestinian flag be raised outside St Andrew's House as an indication of Scotland's solidarity with the people of Palestine. Scotland will always raise her voice in favour of peace and humanity.
Thank you. The First Minister will now take questions on the issues raised in his statement. I intend to allow around 30 minutes, after which we will need to move on to the next item of business. I encourage members wishing to ask a question who haven't already done so to press the request to speak buttons. And I call first Russell Finlay.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. We must never forget the horrors of October the 7th, 2023, the rape, murder and kidnap of innocent Israelis at the hands of Hamas terrorists. And we are all deeply disturbed by the horrors of what is happening in Gaza, with so many innocent civilians, adults and children, killed while others starve. The events in the Middle East are a blight on humanity, and I don't doubt the sincerity of the First Minister's feelings. But I also believe that this Parliament should focus the powers it has to improve people's lives here in Scotland. I believe that issues here need our full and urgent attention. Drugs deaths are the worst in Europe for the 7th consecutive year. Many communities live in fear of serious violence. Lives are being lost due to chronic problems in the NHS. I would rather Mr Swinney provided a statement on these issues for which he has responsibility. But since this statement is before us, I would like to ask John Swinney about his demand to immediately recognise Palestinian statehood. This will be seen by many as premature, impractical and counterproductive. John Swinney says that he has spoken with Scotland's proud and valued Jewish community in an attempt to allay their concerns. So my question is, what does he expect their reaction will be to his statement today?
Before I call the First Minister, can I remind members, as emotional as this topic may be, we have listened to the First Minister with respect. We will listen to others with questions with the same respect. First Minister.
President Officer, I agree with Russell Finlay that we should never forget what happened on the 7th of October 2023, and I agree with him that we should never forget what's going on in Gaza just now and has been going on in Gaza for some considerable time. I willingly accept my responsibility for the issues for which I have responsibility. I was here leading a debate on those questions yesterday. I will be here tomorrow answering First Minister's questions, as I do every Thursday, and I will appear here whenever Parliament asks me to appear here to account for my actions. Some of my responsibilities are covered in this statement, which is about the way in which our enterprise agencies operate. That is my responsibility, and I have to explain to Parliament the approaches that we are taking. On the question of the recognition of the Palestinian state, I don't think it's premature. I think it's long overdue, to be honest. And long overdue by multiple decades, Presiding Officer. And lastly, I met with the Jewish community on Monday. I did so to explain to them face to face what I was thinking about the way in which this issue had to be handled. It's not the first time I've met the community. I have had regular meetings with the community. I am certain the community will be disappointed by some of the things that I've said today. I'm not in any way in doubt about that. But I have to look at the situation in Gaza. I have to think about the responsibility that my ministers carry to act within the law, and that has underpinned the central decision that I have announced here today, because I'm expected as First Minister, as are my ministers, and I expect of them to operate within the law. And the current situation in relation to the case of genocide puts ministers in a position that if we don't take the actions that I'm taking today, we could be in risk of not operating within the law.
Ms Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, the situation in Gaza is beyond intolerable. The deliberate starvation of children, the killing of innocent civilians trying to access aid, the collective punishment of a population with tens of thousands killed, schools, hospitals, lives destroyed. We need the bloodshed to stop right now. There must be an immediate ceasefire, the free flow of humanitarian assistance, the release of hostages so they are back with their families where they belong, and a pathway to a two-state solution with lasting peace. I am clear that Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal and clearly breaching international law. He is more interested in staying in power and out of jail than he is interested in peace, and he must be held to account and face justice for his actions. Let me also be clear that Hamas is a terrorist organisation that committed brutal atrocities on October 7, 2023, and they too have no interest in peace. But the people of Palestine and Israel deserve to live in peace, freedom and security. Diplomacy, international engagement and building partnerships to work towards peace matters. That's why I welcome the significant decision by the UK Government that we will recognise a Palestinian state before the UN General Assembly this month, a move done alongside allied nations such as France, Australia, Canada, Belgium and others. Does the First Minister also agree with the actions taken by the UK Labour Government to remove the block on the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice, to remove the block on UNRWA and restore its funding, to introduce Project Pure Hope to evacuate injured Gazan children and treat them here in the UK, and to sanction Israeli ministers who have incited settler violence? Presiding Officer, this has gone on too long. The world has failed. The illegal occupation and genocide must end now.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I very much welcome the comments made by Mr Sarwar. I agree with his characterisation of the situation in Gaza. I agree with his description of Hamas as a terrorist organisation that are not interested in peace, and I agree with his call for there to be international focus on the use of international institutions to deliver peace, freedom and security within the Middle East. I think the steps taken by the United Kingdom Government have been welcome. I've set out in my statement where I believe they should go further, but where they have come, they are welcome. We are actively engaged with the UK Government on the transport of some children from Gaza to the United Kingdom, which Scotland will play a part in providing that health care to support those children and also to support their families. And we are obviously having constructive discussions about the ability of supporting students from Gaza to come to Scotland and the United Kingdom as a consequence of the arrangements put in place. So I want us to act with as much solidarity and agreement as we can, because only by the collective endeavours of us all can we possibly apply the pressure on the Israeli government and Prime Minister Netanyahu to reverse this disastrous course and to protect the people of Gaza, because they have suffered unbearably and it must come to an end.
Ross Greer.
Israel is an apartheid state. It has occupied Palestinian land and brutalised the Palestinian people for almost 80 years. And over the last 2 years, it has systematically slaughtered the people of Gaza, a genocide. I'm glad that the Scottish Government has finally accepted the Scottish Greens' proposal to end all public funding for Israel's arms dealers. This sets an example for nations across Europe and the world to follow. But we can and we must go further. When Putin brutally and illegally invaded Ukraine, the Scottish Government rightly and immediately called on every Scottish business to sever all ties and cease all trade with Russia. Palestinian lives are worth no less than Ukrainian or Scottish lives. So will the First Minister take the opportunity this afternoon to make that same call? Will he ask every business in Scotland to join the global boycott against apartheid Israel?
First Minister.
President Officer, the comments that I've made in my statement today set out the range of interventions the Scottish Government can take, a very significant range of interventions that we can take within our power. And part of that is about the approach that we're taking on international trade, and we are making it clear that the Scottish Government will not support the development and the encouragement and the nurturing of international trade. And that is the correct approach for us to take to ensure that we are focused entirely on using our influence and our resources to ensure that this conflict is brought to an end.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, given the historic responsibility we hold in Great Britain for the desperate situation now unfolding in Palestine, both of our governments have a duty and an obligation to act, or the images of the children of Gaza should deserve to haunt us for 100 years. The people of Gaza and of Israel are now governed by regimes that operate only in their own hate-filled interests and at devastating humanitarian costs, both to the remaining Israeli hostages and to the citizens of Gaza. I am gratified to hear the First Minister talk of our support, the government's support, for the organisation Kids OR, an organisation I've hosted in this Parliament, and I welcome the announcement of 20 children that will be brought to receive NHS care here in Scotland. Can I ask the First Minister what scope there will be to expand that number, given the unfolding humanitarian disaster in that benighted land? First Minister.
Can I welcome the comments that Mr Cole-Hamilton has made, and I've visited Kids OR in Dundee. They're an organisation that has deployed medical care of an incredibly sophisticated level in very difficult and challenging circumstances, and their intervention has been very welcome. I'm glad that we're able to support them in the way that we can. I admire the organisation enormously. In relation to the provision of medical care through the National Health Service, we are working collaboratively with the United Kingdom Government on that question. Mr Cole-Hamilton will appreciate, of course, there are all sorts of visa issues and transfer issues that have to be arranged. We cannot do that unilaterally. We have to do that in cooperation with the United Kingdom Government, and I welcome the engagement that we've had with the United Kingdom Government on pursuing this issue. So the answer to his question is that we are willing to be as helpful as we can to as many families as we can, but it will be determined by that collaboration with the United Kingdom Government on the number of children and families that we can support.
Paul McLennan, to be followed by Jackson Carlow.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Over the past few months, we have seen mass starvation in Gaza, denied by the Israeli Government, bombing of hospitals and murder of innocent journalists. An estimated 63,000 Palestinians have been killed by the Israeli Government. I know he agrees with me this is genocide, but should the Scottish Government be supporting a total boycott of Israeli goods, extensive sanctions on the State of Israel and a complete ban on arms sales to Israel?
First Minister.
So what I've tried to do today is to set out the range of actions that are within the powers of the Scottish Government, and I have explored this issue extensively to maximise the effectiveness of the intervention we can make because of the gravity of the situation that Mr McLennan recounts to me. And the steps that have been set out are designed to provide the maximum response we can within Scotland to the situation we face. But we will, of course, consider what other steps emerge in the fullness of time.
Jackson Carlo, to be followed by Emma Roddick.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The First Minister will understand there will be differences between us in some aspects of the actions he's outlined this afternoon. But will he join Scottish politicians of several parties who've drawn a distinction between the State of Israel and the government, the present government of Israel, and the Netanyahu administration? Israel is a democracy where at successive elections a majority have not voted in favour of Mr Netanyahu's government or some of the extreme coalition partners within it. But the conflation in terms of language to talk of the State of Israel and its prosecution of the atrocities in Gaza is one which is used by others who have a much more malign intent towards the State of Israel itself.
First Minister.
Well, I hope in my statement that I set out my absolute view that there needs to be a peaceful settlement in the Middle East in which the State of Israel and a Palestinian state can exist side by side, and they can live in peace and security in the fashion that I discussed with Mr Sarwar a moment ago. I acknowledge that there is a difference between the actions of the Netanyahu government and the actions of all of the people of Israel. There is clearly a difference between those two elements, and it is important that the Netanyahu government is in command of the government of Israel. It is that government that is prosecuting the situation in Israel. It is in Gaza. That is the government that needs to be held to account. That is the government that needs to change course. And all of the actions that I'm setting out or endorsing or encouraging are designed to have that purpose.
Emma Roddick, to be followed by Pauline McNeill.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I've got many constituents who show up week after week to vigils and protests for Palestine, adding their voice to the many Scots who oppose the genocide happening in Gaza. I know that the Scottish Government has previously engaged with Gaza Families Reunited to lend support in pushing for the UK Government to open safe routes for those who have family already in Scotland to join that family, something that is personally affecting many of those I've met in Inverness at protests outside the townhouse. Can the First Minister give any update on this work?
First Minister. The Scottish Government has contacted the United Kingdom Government. The Minister for Equalities wrote to the UK Government in November 2024 in relation to the Gaza Families Reunited scheme, and on behalf of Gaza Families Reunited to encourage the establishment of a Gaza Family Reuniting scheme similar to the scheme that we had in place in relation to Ukraine. Now, the United Kingdom Government has not agreed to such a proposition, but I think the ongoing awfulness of the situation and the concerns of families that Emma Roddick has put to me demonstrates the need for us to continue to press for such an approach to be taken to ensure that we do all that we can to support individuals affected by this crisis.
Pauline McNeill, to be followed by George Adam.
The Palestinian people will rejoice that their national flag is over government buildings. But does the First Minister agree with me that it isn't actually a war anymore, but it's ethnic cleansing amounting to genocide with a clear intent by Israel to occupy this land? I welcome that the government will try to bring 20 children here for emergency treatment. I myself have tried to help a young girl, Lamar, who is at threat of losing her limbs if she doesn't get treatment. The big issue here is how to evacuate those Palestinians from Gaza. Can the First Minister say any more about how we're going to get those who need this emergency treatment out of Gaza to get the treatment that they so desperately need?
First Minister.
I agree with Pauline McNeill that this is no longer a war. It stopped being a war a long time ago, and that the description of what is happening in Gaza as a genocide accurately describes what is going on. So I agree with her characterisation of ethnic cleansing that is underway. Pauline McNeill, I know how substantially she will be acting to help the young girl that she raised with me, and she raises the very real practical difficulties, and they are tied up with the fact that we have no effective humanitarian routes of engagement in Gaza at this present moment, and that is entirely at the hand of the Israeli government. I met with representatives of UNICEF during the summer who told me of the volume of aid that is sitting literally within viewing distance of the people of Gaza, but cannot get there because of the actions of the Israeli government. So that is critical as to how international pressure and collaboration, our collaboration with the UK government, can sustain that humanitarian effort to create the corridors and the pathways to enable us to be able to support young people like the young person that Pauline McNeill raises with me. So I can assure her that we are actively engaged in trying to find solutions here, but they will depend on the pressure that can be applied in the international community to create those pathways.
George Adam, to be followed by Ruth Maguire.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the First Minister comment on the number of journalists who have been killed during this conflict? It's 247. This is more than every single conflict since the First World War. So does he agree that those in the media must be allowed to continue to tell the stories and the world of what is happening in Gaza?
First Minister.
I share the concern that Mr Adam has expressed. It is important that there is open and dispassionate analysis of what is going on in Gaza. That will be an essential source of information in relation to the international criminal proceedings and the considerations of the International Court of Justice. So I mourn for the loss of all lives in the conflict. I mourn for the loss of journalists' lives because they are able to share with us the truth of what is happening. I was reminded, Presiding Officer, at an event just before the end of the recess, of a quote by the former late Presiding Officer George Reid in the debate on the Iraq War in this Parliament in 2003, where George Reid said, "The first victim of the war is truth." And that relates directly to the comment that Mr Adam has put to me. And it's important that on this occasion we remember the fine and distinguished words of one of the greatest colleagues I've ever had, George Reid, who gave us the insight into the dangers that Mr Adam raises with me today.
Ruth Maguire, to be followed by Brian Whittle.
Presiding Officer, the crimes of Israel against the Palestinian people demand concrete action from the international community, like the welcome pause in awards to arms companies outlined by the First Minister. Boycott, divestment and sanctions are a peaceful, effective way to encourage compliance with international law. Will the First Minister instruct his government to ensure they're deploying against Israel and all those profiting from the genocide every single non-violent, punitive measure at its disposal until such a time as Israel ends its brutal and violent, illegal occupation of Palestine, genocide, war crimes and crimes against humanity?
First Minister.
President Officer, I've set out a package of measures in the economic, humanitarian and diplomatic space which are within my responsibilities to be able to undertake. I have explored with my ministerial colleagues extensively the range of options that are available to us, and the products of that analysis is what Parliament has before it today. I must act in a lawful fashion at all times. It is an essential obligation, as I've set out in the statement that I've given to Parliament today. So I reassure Ruth Maguire that every step I can take is being taken.
Brian Whittle, to be followed by Christine Graham.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. In the earlier answer, First Minister, I heard you discuss the amount of aid that sits waiting on the border within touching distance of those civilians who need it. And I wonder if he shares my dismay at the inability of the UN and the international community to collaborate to deliver such vital supplies to the population of Gaza who so desperately need it.
First Minister.
With respect, I don't think that's the problem. The problem is the fact that the organisations that I have spoken to have given me a very clear outline of the arrangements that they have in place, and they have a track record of delivering that aid. What is necessary is a safe pathway to do so. There are people who are going to some of the existing aid arrangements and are being killed when they are going to get aid. So that illustrates that it is, in certain circumstances, unsafe for people even to access aid that is managing to reach them. But what we need is safe humanitarian routes to get that aid. And the aid is there, it is close at hand, but it needs safety to get there.
Christine Graham, to be followed by Eleanor Whittam.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. To call out the Israeli government's actions and their deadly actions in Gaza and the West Bank, genocide, which I've done on many occasions in articles, is not anti-Semitic. Indeed, many in the Jewish diaspora are equally appalled. Dissent in Israel of Netanyahu's actions is suppressed. So I note the call on the UK government to prohibit the import of goods from Israeli-occupied Palestinian territories. But can I suggest that the UK go further and prohibit imports from Israel itself? Devolution has its limits, but individuals like me in Scotland have not, and it is my intention to boycott those imports in the meantime.
First Minister.
As Christine Graham will know, there are, and as she recounts in her question, there are devolved and reserved responsibilities that apply on these issues. And there is a free trade agreement between the United Kingdom and Israel, which I do not think should be maintained because of the situation in Gaza. And that would relate to many of the issues that Christine Graham puts to me, and which would be resolved if we were to take a different course in the United Kingdom about that engagement with Israel on trade.
Eleanor Whittam, to be followed by Maurice Golden.
Like my colleague George Adam, I am very concerned about the number of journalists that have been killed in Gaza. When I graduated with a degree in journalism, I left that university building with an absolute knowledge in my heart that my job would be to go out into the world and bear witness and hold a mirror up to the world to show exactly what is happening. What we are seeing in Gaza is not collateral damage, it's a pattern. Can I ask the First Minister, will he join me in emphatically condemning these killings, and will he make urgent representations to the UK Government and international bodies to demand action to stop the killing of journalists and secure accountability from those responsible? After all, deliberate attacks against journalists during an armed conflict constitutes a war crime.
First Minister.
I could not have made the point more powerfully than Elena Whittam has made that point. And it is important, it is critical that journalists are able to share with the world what is going on in Gaza. It is essential for that very purpose of openness and truthfulness, which is to be at the heart of media reporting, but it's also important for the issues that I raised in relation to the international criminal proceedings and the work of the International Court of Justice to ensure that what is happening in Gaza is understood and part of the understanding of the suffering of the people of Gaza.
Maurice Golden, to be followed by James Dornan.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. In order to aid the humanitarian effort, the Scottish Government could further activate its soft power to promote, for example, the expertise at Dundee University, notably in the areas of groundwater aquifer utilisation to support drinking water supply, as well as cutting-edge research in housing and community design for those temporarily displaced. Is this something the First Minister would consider?
First Minister.
I would be happy to consider that, and Mr Golden in his question highlights some of the great strengths that exist within the University of Dundee, of which I'm very proud, and which are an essential part of what has been deployed on other occasions in other circumstances around the world. So he makes a very good and strong point. It does come back, however, to what is the context within which those strengths could be deployed. There needs to be peace. There needs to be an approach which means those skills can be deployed safely, and that is what we are lacking just now. So therefore the necessity of there to be a peaceful outcome is absolutely critical to enable the very good suggestions that Mr Golden makes to take their course.
And James Dornan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, given the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs and other humanitarian organisations have declared that famine is taking place in Gaza and at least 158 people died of starvation during August, what steps is the Scottish Government taking further to what you made in your original comments to address this humanitarian crisis? And whilst recognising obstruction is the responsibility of the Israeli Government and IDF, how is it pressing the UK Government to take even more urgent action, both in terms of increasing aid and in using diplomatic and political pressure to ensure that food and medical supplies can reach civilians without obstruction, particularly whilst this unforgivable, deliberate starving of children continues in the ongoing genocide in Gaza?
Always through the Chair. First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the issues that Mr Donovan raises are absolutely central to this debate, and I assure him that I have used every opportunity I have in dialogue with the Prime Minister to advance this discussion with the United Kingdom Government. The Prime Minister has been entirely willing to engage on this question, and I welcome that. I have written to the Prime Minister today setting out the various propositions and proposals that I have explained to Parliament today. I would welcome further dialogue with the UK Government to try to advance these issues and to enable me to convey to the Prime Minister the sentiments of the Scottish Parliament, which will of course be debated in the debate which is about to commence, which I think are important in contributing to the thinking of the United Kingdom Government on the actions that it needs to take in this respect.
Thank you. That concludes this item of business. There will be a brief pause before we move to the next item of business to allow front benches to change.